If you need help, then dial your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator with me, your host, Brian West, here to give you the top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made in this week. Now, as usual, I'll give you the top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made in first, and then we may do a trailer, a movie clip, or something that's going on in the community, or a skit, and then I'll give you the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made in this week. So let's waste no time. Let's get to it. Story number 1. Boardman kids win the Green Team Award. Cleanly neighborhoods create eye candy for onlookers. Boardman kids took first place in the Mahoning County Green Team competition. This stresses the environment of cleanliness, which is good because stressing environmental cleanliness early helps kids develop good awareness about the environment at an early age. Story number 2. City schools will continue feeding children through July. After numerous headlines surfaced during lockdown about the importance of school lunches, there have been multiple headlines focusing on how local schools will continue providing food for children who depend on school lunches for a meal. Although there is still opposition to such benefits, children remain in the middle of a long-standing fight to stress the importance of jobs and good parenting habits. Story number 3. Fracking back in the headlines. Local environmental activists will be busy as they try to fight for voters to have more control over how fracking is regulated in local communities. Many activists are fighting for a basic right that voters should have to protect their environment. This story is still developing as local environmental activists push for legal action and basic rights. Story number 4. There are many different types of protesters. Although most of the protests that took place locally to commemorate Mr. George Floyd's death were peaceful, some protests did result in broken windows to a Youngstown police car, along with some broken windows at Shoffin Career Centers, and a fight broke out in Warren. And conflicts with peacemakers continue on. This story highlights a growing divide in what people feel about law and order locally and abroad. Story number 5. States' deflated tax revenue could result to pay freezes and cuts. Governor DeWine's only option to balance the budget may be pay freezes and cuts. His decision to shut down the state has backfired into a mass loss of state revenue, tax revenue that is. DeWine has faced mass opposition as many did not agree with his decision to sacrifice the economy for the safety of others. It's safe to say that Ohio may have to dig its way out of the financial pit that it's placed itself in. This story is still developing. Story number 6. Local hostility. Police is on the rise. After a curfew was issued locally, police reported multiple incidents of hostility as they tried to make arrests. As local officials tried to maintain law and order, numerous reports continue to surface about how people are responding to police arrest. Reports often focus on police, but local reports show that the growing consequences of resisting arrest continues to rise. Multiple developing stories and headlines continue to show a growing gap between law and order and law-abiding citizens. Story number 7, and the top 2 local headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. More fighting may stress the need for more mediators. One local headline centers in on how a 63-year-old man was knocked down, causing him to be put in the hospital. The man reportedly claimed that he was in an altercation with a man who assaulted him, but denied that he had done anything to offend his accuser. Another report of a man who was hit with a sledgehammer also made headlines. These altercations highlight how conflicts usually escalate into something bigger, and this is why this story is in the top, because we've seen a lot of these altercations taking place locally where it starts off small and then it grows into something bigger. Story number 8 in the top local headline and developing news story that made it in this week. Local public workers downsizing when they're needed the most. Fire chiefs and city officials need more help, but with slashing local budgets, many are forced to downsize. Local fire stations will feel the heat as city officials try to stay within their budgets. Such headlines highlight the growing effect that coronavirus has had on the valley. Protests a few weeks ago by healthcare workers and the fact that cities were overthrown by protesters show the need for public workers. This headline also highlights the reality of why public workers are worth the buck, especially when they do their job the correct way. Well, those are our top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made it in this week. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. You're the Mediator with me, Brian West. I'll be right back.
If you need help, then dial your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.
If you want to check out the stories that almost made it in or did make it in, go to our Twitter feed on our website. Check out everything. All of the sources are there. And go to the website. It's method8inc.com, method8inc.com, where you can buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or just sponsor a program.